Hey Joe, don't it make you wanna go to war once more? Hey Joe, why the devil did we go to war?
Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like you to meet Joe. This is what the American press say. The movie Joe must surely rank in impact with Bonnie and Clyde. Time magazine.
Welcome to That's Canon, where we talk about the Canon Film Library and other similar films. I'm Phil.
And I'm Greg.
So, fresh off the success of our first episode, we are here to review Joe.
Joe from 1970, right? 1971, 1970?
1970, starring Peter Boyle as Joe.
The titular Joe.
You know, what did you think in one sentence?
In one sentence. Okay, that's gonna be tough. I think my overall reaction was I was pleasantly surprised. It was it dragged a little bit towards the end of the second act, but I was surprisingly engaged and entertained. Maybe is the wrong word to use, but I was interested and engaged the whole time. So yeah, I think maybe pleasantly surprised was probably the way that I'd sum it up.
I would say pleasantly surprised in some aspects, ungodly bored in others is how I would describe Joe. So let's go ahead. I mean, we'll just dive right into it. Let's go ahead, start talking about Joe. The movie opens up with a guy taking a bath right
in the middle of their living room.
Of their living room, right? Susan Sarandon comes in and some dude is bathing in the living room.
It was super weird. That was I was talking about all the notes that I had taken before, and as I was watching the movie, and that's literally the first line in my notes is, did they have a bathtub in the middle of their living room? I mean, and I think it was just the fact that they're in kind of a shitty small studio apartment, and then there's nowhere to put it. But even in those kind of apartment buildings, there was a shared bathroom usually. There wasn't just a tub randomly against the wall.
Exactly. The guy taking the bath, his name is Frank. I think they say his name twice in the entire film.
I had a lot of trouble following names. I don't know about you.
Same here. It was kind of hit or miss whether you heard the name or even if they even said the name.
Yeah.
So Frank is played by Patrick McDermott, who was only in one other film after this, which was the French Connection with Gene Hackman. So
okay.
he kind of disappeared. I actually tried to research this guy a little bit, and I was like, okay, he seems to have this pretty big role in Joe, and Joe was received pretty well. So obviously he did way more after this. No,
he dropped
one other
off the face of the
film.
earth. Oh, okay.
And then, disappeared off the face of the earth. So
I thought he looked kind of familiar.
Same here.
He had, I don't know, he had that face. I don't know. There's something about his face that looked really familiar. I'd seen him in other shitty, exploitation movies in the 70s, but I guess not.
And I think there's another person in here who I saw, and I was like, I've seen him in other things, but it ended up that I didn't. But anyways. Frank is taking a bath in the middle of their living room, and then Susan Sarandon comes in and then immediately gets naked.
And immediately disrobes, which I was not expecting. I didn't know that she... I mean, was this an early film role for her?
This was her first film role.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So do you think that plays into it?
That's why I asked that. I was wondering if because I didn't think she, did nude scenes in her later films, but maybe this was just I'm trying to break into the business and, whatever. It's the 70s, man. Let's do it.
Got to do something. So they kind of they talk for a little bit about kind of just nothing. Susan Sarandon's character, Melissa, is talking about how she was with her parents, and then Frank was kind of well, why would you do that? So there's a little strife you can tell between Susan Sarandon and her parents.
Yeah. And they set that up pretty quick.
Yeah, immediately. They want you to know that Susan Sarandon and her parents don't get along with each other for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, it's you can definitely tell that she has even just the way that they interact, like her and her boyfriend, like they're clearly setting up this like theme of like everyone's relationships are just so dysfunctional and strained, and like he just like does not give a shit about her at all. And he like you can just like see her like struggling to like get him to like open up and like connect with her. It like and it ended up being like a theme throughout the whole movie, but like just like super depressing right off the bat. Like walking into this like grimy, bathtub apartment, and them watching them just like struggle to interact with each other. It was definitely set the theme.
And then Frank, and I think probably one of the most graphic drug use scenes I've seen in a film, outside of like RoboCop 2, he starts tying on that rubber tubing,
the like surgical tubing,
and starts to shoot up, I'm assuming heroin or something.
They don't think they specify, do they? I mean, we can speculate, but yeah, I mean that was one of the things I wrote down. Was like this is really graphic. Like, we're probably like, you and I are probably desensitized to that a little bit at this point. I mean, probably a lot of people like now are just sort of like that seems pretty common. But like, was that common in the 70s? Like for a movie that came out in 1970, like that seems really graphic. Like depiction of drug use. I don't know if that was common or not, but
I can't say that I've seen something like that so graphically done. I mean, for the most part, most of the drugs that you see in films, especially in the 70s and 80s, is like pot and pills and stuff like that. You don't really see people shooting up, and you can see like, the prick marks on his arm and stuff. So it was very graphic for the time. At least I would say. I do agree. I am not aware of many films going that deep.
Oh yeah, and like you said, like a lot of times when they depict hippies or on screen, like, which I think this, like, supposedly that's what they are. They're sort of like, they're kind of like coming out like tangent to the hippie movement, but it's sort of like, I got the feeling like it was like this, like kind of like grimy, like aftermath, like, ooh, like 1969 Woodstock, like, all the kind of like sunshine and rainbows part of the hippie movement is sort of like behind them. And now they're all just like, it's 1970. Okay. Now what, everyone I know is addicted to drugs, and now we're just like trying to like make do. Like, exactly. It's kind of like the grimy underbelly of that whole subculture, which I assume is what they're trying to do by like, showing the kind of like graphic, like the graphic drug use right off the bat.
Yeah, getting you ready to like, this is what we're going to be talking about. This is what the movie's about. And then Frank leaves. He has to go sell drugs in order to make money for something. They want to buy like a canvas and paint so he can paint.
Yeah, because he's an artist, of course.
Exactly. I'm an artist and I do drugs.
When there's like zero art in their apartment.
Exactly. Yeah. So Frank leaves, and I made a note. He is wearing a jacket that has tech sergeant chevrons from the Air Force on it. So
I didn't pick up on that. Oh, okay. It's like a fatigue jacket.
It's like that. It's a blue jacket. It doesn't look like anything I've ever seen in the Air Force. And yeah, it has tech sergeant stripes on it. Very weird. And then he wears like the old priest hat. It's kind of like
I was also I actually noted that hat. Like, it's like, oh, that's kind of a cool hat. I didn't. Yeah. I couldn't place it, but it did kind of like, now that you mentioned it, it's like an old like a friar's hat, kind of like that really wide brim hat. It was a weird. He was dressed very strangely. I didn't pick up on the insignias on his jacket though. That's pretty cool. I mean, I think like they talk about it later in the movie too, where like a lot of the men in the movie talk like vaguely about their war experience at one point. And I don't think he ever talks about it, but that's interesting that's another like connection he has with some of the older guys. I mean, would it have been Vietnam for him?
I would think so. 1970, I think so.
He would have been like that. I guess he would have been back by then, or I mean, I guess because he didn't seem. I mean, if he was like Susan Sarandon's age, they were supposed to be sort of like, I guess like late 20s, like 20 somethings. So it would have had to have been. I think he probably would have been too old or too young for the Korean War, probably, right?
Yeah, Susan Sarandon was born in 1946. That would have made her 24 years old for Joe, if I'm doing my math right. So yeah, they're supposed to be in their mid 20s,
right?
Yeah, just really weird. Stuff like that always catches my eye, especially when it's a character that doesn't seem to have any kind of military history. Like, why are you wearing something like this? I never understand the appeal of it. Maybe he's secretly like an Air Force, history buff or something. But
which would be really weird for a hippie character
exactly
to be into military history in 1970.
So he goes out and he's going to sell his stuff. And the one thing I found really odd when he's, the few scenes that he's selling drugs is everyone wants to see it. And it's always like a pill, right?
No one trusts him that it's like, which it isn't. I mean, they're rightly like I think we see early on where he's like, prepping the stuff and it's like clearly fake or like, not quote the good stuff. And he's like, he's trying to like pass it off on them. Yeah. And then you're right. Like, and immediately in the next scene, like the guy in the bar that, that they're he's trying to sell to, and he's like, yeah, let me just try a little bit of it outside. He's like, nope, no samples, man. Take it or leave it. It's just trust me.
Just let me see it. Just let me see it. I would have no idea what I'm looking at. If someone showed me like
a Tic Tac,
Dayquil, and Speed is I'm assuming is what they're selling is Speed because
I think they say that later on, right?
Yeah, I would have no idea. They all look like pills.
One heroin, please.
Yes, exactly. So during the selling of the drugs, Susan Sarandon's character for some reason shows up and
at the bar, right? Yeah,
at the bar. And I guess we forgot the scene before that. She ingests, it just inhales pills, like left and right. She was just like fistful of pills, eating them. So she shows up, and Frank is like, "Hey, look, she's taking the drugs that I'm selling." And the guy gets spooked. He's like, "I don't want that."
She comes in and she's like off her rocker. She's like barely standing up, and she's like, I don't know if she was slurring her words or not, but like you're right. She's like clearly like, this is what this pill that you got in your hand is going to do. Like, no, I'm good, dude. I thought like he's clearly out just like for some kind of like happy time pill, and in walks this like depressing picture of addiction. It's like,
exactly,
nah, man, I'm good.
And then
some fresh air.
Frank, being the great stand-up guy that he is, goes, "Here, take more drugs and go away." And so Susan Sarandon eats more. I'm assuming, Speed. And she kind of walks away. And then it shows more of Frank selling drugs in front of like a record store or something like that. And I wrote down the Brady kids.
Oh my God, right?
Wanting to buy. The two blonde girls.
Yeah, the two like young blonde girls. I mean, like I wrote the same note about them. It's like they look like they're like 14 or 15 years old. And like the Brady kids is like that's like a perfect description of them. Like the way that they frame them and the way that they're like their wardrobe, the way that they're dressed, like makes them look like they're just like these like suburban teenagers who wandered into the seedy inner city alley to buy drugs from this like hippie guy, and like they clearly don't know what they're doing. The one girl's like remember, oh, we should look at it first. Yeah, let's see it first. It was just it just felt so dirty to watch.
Yep. And then the one's like, you do it first. No, I'm not doing it first. Like, you do it first. And then you never get to see the outcome of it. But yeah, I thought that was really weird that all of a sudden you have these two characters that come in and they look like normal people.
Oh, yeah.
They just want to buy Speed. Awkward. And then we go back to Susan Sarandon, who's in a drugstore.
Yes, this is a hard scene to watch.
And she opens up a lipstick and starts coloring her face. And at first I was like, maybe she's just sad or depressed about like Frank being a jerk to her. But no, she's clearly so zonked out of her head.
Oh, yeah.
She's out of touch with reality, right?
Oh,
but what she does next, I have always wanted to do, Greg, in a store. In that she puts her arm behind a whole bunch of stuff and just starts walking, knocking things off the shelf.
And making like solid eye contact with the store clerk the entire time she's doing it. Like that whole scene, I mean, the part where she's, like you said, like where she like takes the lipstick and you think she's gonna like try it on, but then she like starts painting her like tiger stripes on her cheeks with it.
Yeah.
I mean, and this isn't the only scene in the movie I thought this about, but like if you had maybe lit that and scored that scene a little differently, that could have easily been like a horror, like something out of a horror movie.
Oh, definitely.
It was just scary to watch. Like she like totally unhinged, and she starts like giggled to herself because she's like looking in the mirror as she's doing it, and it was just it was super like unsettling is maybe the word. Like especially coming off of the scenes earlier where she's like like clearly she didn't want to like you know pop these pills and do the drugs with her boyfriend, but then she's just like so like starved for any kind of like a good feeling that she just like gives into it, and then cut to these scenes where she just like off her rocker in public. It was so sad.
It was. And then the two clerks, or the two people who run the store, the woman tackles her, Susan Sarandon, in like some dish rags, and the guy nonchalantly walks over and kind of looks at her while smoking a cigarette, and the lady's like, she's overdosed on drugs. And
she's on drugs, Bob.
And then so they call the paramedics, and they come and they wheel her away. And then that's when you find out that the nurse goes like, oh, she's overdosed on speed. Right. Now, Greg, I know we're not drug aficionados. Do you know what speed is?
No.
Okay.
I certainly wouldn't have expected something called speed to make you want to paint your face with lipstick. But then
exactly.
Again, I'm not a frequent drug user, so I
exactly
do anything I don't know.
The hardest thing that we do is NyQuil. The speed is actually meth.
Is it?
Yeah, really weird, because like I Googled it because I paused it actually.
And what a bunch of nerds we are! Like, oh, what are the Googling drugs, reading Wikipedia entries.
Exactly.
I'm
like, I Googled
bunch of squares.
How do you overdose on speed?
You're on
oh my god, my Google just went off. it hurt me say that. So yeah, it's a methamphetamine drug. So it's kind of like meth. You can smoke it, you can snort it, you can eat it, and it's supposed to make you increased activity and body temperature. So I guess that's why they call it speed, because you're, moving a lot.
Yeah.
Wakeful, talkative, fast breather. You don't eat. Susan Sarandon doesn't sound like she took speed, because she definitely was not talking. She was silent throughout the entire previous scene.
Oh yeah,
but whatever.
It seems like she's like hallucinating too. I mean, just kind of like visually like loopy looking. I wouldn't have pegged it for that, but
yep. So it's methamphetamines. Now we know.
Wow, thanks Google.
Exactly. Total nerd moment. Had to know what meth does. So she's like laying in the bed, and then the parents walk in, her mom and dad.
Great. And like my first impression of them was like the perfect, the way that they had them dressed and talking to each other, like the perfect sort of like pearl clutching kind of like upper, like out of touch upper class people, and like just like exactly who you'd expect to play the parents of, kind of like a drug addicted daughter, like the parents who are sort of like ashamed and I like
exactly.
And you get like, I got that impression immediately, just like looking at them and watching them interact with each other, like the dad and the mom. It was perfect.
So the dad is Dennis Patrick, and his character's name is Bill, and the mom is Audrey Carey, and she's played by and her character's name is Joan Compton. Now, so
Compton, that's right.
Compton. So Dennis Patrick was the guy that I was like, I've seen him in things before.
Same.
Because he kind of looks like the actor from Caddyshack, the older guy, maybe like a little bit older in this, but he just has one of those faces where like you look at it and you go, I've seen you in things.
Yeah, they kind of like generic old white dude. I mean, he had a kind of like a Charlton Heston look to him. I thought too, like when he kind of smiled a couple times. But like, yeah, I feel like a lot of actors from that era, like they all had kind of like really similar haircuts, and exactly. I got that impression too.
The generic, just like the generic old man look. But while he did do a couple things after this film, I've definitely never seen anything that he's ever been in. So Bill and Joan are there, and it was like Bill was having a little bit of an issue with Joan because she was upset that her daughter OD'd, and she was embarrassed, and Bill was kind of like get over it. It's our daughter. Like, don't worry about like what other people will think.
Which
so
was surprising. Yeah, like
Yeah.
I like I said, like I got that like strong impression that they were like that kind of like sweep it under the rug, like she's like the family disappointment. But I was like a surprise to see that the mom and dad were sort of like on different pages, where she was like the mom was totally what I was expecting, but the dad was like, no, like we gotta she's your daughter, for God's sakes, you gotta help her and like get her out of the situation, whether she likes it or not.
Exactly. So Bill and Joan kind of split apart at this part of because the mom does not want to see where Susan Sarandon's character has been living. Like, she doesn't want to see the squalor in drug infested, apartment. So
yeah.
Bill goes in and you see him like stomping on needles. He's tearing posters of, was that Susan Sarandon?
It was, I think it was like that. It was like a posed photo, right? Like you're talking about like
exactly,
the one on the wall. Yeah.
You know what? I actually thought that was kind of a tasteful photo, because it wasn't just like graphic nudity. It was actually like her standing in a field or something like that. And it actually looked kind of, tasteful.
Yeah. It was kind of like a nice picture. And then, and I'm sure that was intentional. Like, oh, look at this nice scene of like my daughter being happy in like, what might have been like a normal relationship. And he just like rips it off the wall. He just like the thought of it just angers him more than probably the drugs and everything.
Probably. And then he starts, ripping clothes out of the drawers. And then in walks Frank. And Frank is like, whoa, what the hell are you doing? And
understandably so, I guess.
The realization,
what are you doing in my bathtub apartment?
Exactly. The realization that the old man is Susan Sarandon's dad sets in. And Frank turns into a complete like sleazeball, even sleazier than what he originally was. He kind of like goads Bill a little bit.
Oh yeah, he totally rubs it in his face. He's like your daughter's like she's not the princess you think she is, and like just like going off like egging him on and just like trying to like provoke a reaction, which of course he does.
Yes, exactly. Bill is getting more and more pissed as the conversation ensues. Now, throughout the film, for some reason, and I don't know if maybe we were watching at the same time and the Amazon servers were like, oh my God, two people are watching Joe. But did it have like this Shutter effect?
It absolutely did. I wrote that down. I meant to ask you because I think it was like right around that scene, like right after the hospital, like right after the hospital scene when they're the mom and dad are going up to like kind of like get her things from the apartment. Like right in that scene transition, it like jumped down to like 15 frames per second, like super jumpy. It was like you're looking at it through like a strobe light or something.
Yeah,
it was super distracting.
And then Bill grabs Frank and starts pummeling him against the wall. And if this was the intended effect, it was awesome. If not, it's just a really bad copy of the film. But it shows him like beating him against the wall, and it's like missing 5 frames.
So because it was happening so fast.
Yeah. And the blood starts like coming behind Frank. You can see it on the wall and stuff.
Yeah.
And then
it escalated. And like that whole, I mean, you knew kind of what was coming when Frank started like goading the dad. But I mean, it just like, it was sort of like up to that point, sort of like a sad, kind of like depressing drama. But then like that like escalation to like violence, just, I mean, it wasn't huge, but it just seemed to, I was still like a little surprised by it almost. Like I was like not expecting it to get that like brutal right away as he like, cause that's like he doesn't even like start off punching him. He just like the first thing he does is, like you said, just like grabs him by the neck and just like starts slamming his head against the wall. Like the same wall where that poster was.
Yep. Really. Yeah, exactly. It definitely jumped from like, from 50 to 100, right?
Oh yeah.
And then Bill is kind of like looking around the room, realizing he just killed Frank. And this is where I went, well, maybe he should just start injecting drugs into him. It can look like an accident and he can get away with it. Exactly. He stepped on the syringe. It injected him with a whole bunch of heroin. He, hit his head on the wall. He fell down. He died. Right.
Yep.
But he kind of just runs out of the apartment with
like you're totally right. Like you can see that kind of like the world, like the gears churning in his head, and he's like, okay, like how can I like frame this scene so that it makes it look like he was not, like just savagely beaten in a rage. And the thing that he thinks to do is is take a bottle of pills and just like sprinkle it
Oh,
around the
yeah.
body. Like what was this guy? Was he having like a confetti pill fight with someone? Like, like
needs
what
to-
was he thinking?
Eat some of those. Like you need to like get them down into his stomach or something like that
Yeah.
in order for it to look like really, really weird.
Weird choice. I mean, I guess you're desperate and not thinking clearly. I can understand. So he's like, I'm gonna sprinkle these pills around like glitter. Good enough.
And Bill is about to make even more questionable decisions because after killing him, he immediately goes to a bar,
And starts
uh,
drinking.
like
Who
a
wouldn't?
rundown, crappy bar in the middle of nowhere in the city. And that's when we finally meet Joe.
Our good buddy Joe in
Which-
a really strange introduction.
Out of a 107-minute film, Joe shows up 27 minutes into it.
Was it really that far in? I didn't look at the time.
Yes.
I remember thinking that it was like, are we like, where's Joe? Is it going to turn out
Exactly.
like was Joe just like, was he dead? Was he a ghost the whole time? Is that the twist of this movie?
And there was you know what? There was part of it where I thought Joe was going to be like, maybe he's Bill's subconscious or something like that.
It was
You know,
gonna get,
the
like, real
angel on his
weird, yeah.
shoulder, you know, it's going to kind of like comment on, you know, the duality of man, right? It
Oh, yeah.
doesn't go that way though.
Oh, it stays super. Like I had the same thought. Like I thought, I was like, okay, is this going to be a turn where it's going to be like he's going to start seeing it like an old war buddy or something? And Joe, like Joe's going to be, you know, you're going to think he's like a real person, but he's just like a figment of his like hallucination or something. And but like, because I mean, I feel like a lot of movies around then like would maybe try to go in that direction, something a little bit less grounded. But no, it stays firmly feet planted on the ground, and Joe is like way worse.
Oh yeah. If you thought Bill was a bad guy, here's Joe. He's not the hero of this film. Joe is ranting and raving and saying some of the
Yes.
most insane stuff that it, and again, I think it's just because of the day and age that we live in, but
Yeah.
some of his dialogue was so shocking to hear him say
Oh yeah.
that I was kind of like, well, I can't believe that Peter Boyle, the actor, is even saying stuff like this. But I guess, you know, that's the point. It's
Oh,
supposed
yeah,
to
it's
elicit
supposed to be
that
shocking.
reaction.
I mean, like that's actually like a question that I wrote down for myself. I'm curious to hear what you think, but like, yeah, like your first introduction to the character Joe is like, you like it like cuts to the bar where you know where the dad kind of goes in and it's just like you catch Joe like mid rant and he's just like throwing these like really like mean vulgar slurs and
He's throwing down the N-word,
hard
the F word. And I'm not talking about fuck. He's saying the other F word.
Yeah.
A lot of like anti-gay slurs, a lot of racial slurs, just constantly
Oh yeah, like
spewing out of his mouth.
no group gets away unscathed in his rant. Like it's like a Quentin Tarantino movie sometimes. Like the sheer volume of like racial slurs, it's just insane.
The only saving grace of the bar scene was the bartender who was like, he was like, Joe, can you just shut up? He gives Joe 25 cents and goes, go put some music on. And then
Please,
Joe goes
give us
over
a
to the
break.
jukebox and he's like, what's up with all this music? It's a bunch of hippie crap. And
Exactly. Like, and that's what I was thinking the whole time. Like, and it goes on and on. Like before it gets to that point where the bartender is like, Joe, just please give us a break. Go fix the jukebox, please. Like it goes on for like 5 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes, like where he's just like ranting and ranting. And I mean, like someone wrote all this stuff for him to say, I hope, unless, you know, Peter Boyle was just like off, you know, spitting off the dome with some of that stuff, which I hope not. But like, it just goes on and on. It becomes so like it's so uncomfortable. And you wonder, like, if I were like sitting in a bar with this, like and there's like other people in the bar and the bartender, like, how are they not just like, oh my God, shut up.
It's really, really hard to listen to. And that's when Joe makes a comment that he wants to kill hippies.
Yep.
And that he hates hippies.
I wish I could just kill one sometime. I mean, he's like openly like fantasizing about murdering like any of these people that he's talking about in his rants, and just like, you know, I gotta clean up America and, you know, get rid of some of these unsavory. Boy, I wish I had the chutzpah to do that.
Yeah. And Bill goes, I did it. I killed one today. And Joe immediately gets like a love for Bill because Bill has accomplished his dream, right? And they start bonding over the death of this hippie guy.
Yeah.
It
was like super surprising, like how quick Joe turned. He's like, he gets like those doe eyes, like, you did really? And he like doesn't believe him for a second, and then the dad Billy, he like kind of realizes that what he like, oh crap, I just admitted to murder. Basically, he's like, haha, no, I was just joking. And Joe's like, you had me going there, and like you said, like there's like an immediate connection. Joe is like fascinated with this guy now because he like he thinks that he did something that he's like fantasized about doing forever.
Yeah. And then I don't remember how the scene ends. I think like Bill just gets up and leaves.
Yeah, I think Joe like, hey, let me buy a drink, dude. Yeah, I'm Joe, and he like holds his hand out to shake it, and the dad, he just like totally blows him off, goes off to goes in the back, I think, to like make a call or something, and yeah, Joe tries to buy him a drink, and he just like walks off, and then didn't even exchange his name or anything or any kind of contact information or anything. Like he just dad just walks out.
Exactly. And at that point I was like, okay, maybe we'll never see him again. It transitioned to Joe. The idea is now in Joe's head to kill people. And the next scene is Joe at his place of work. I believe it was. It's like he's just sitting in front of a factory machine watching popsicle sticks getting made.
Right? What the hell does that factory produce? I was trying to think of it. It looked like molten lead spaghetti.
Yeah, it was really
it's
weird.
Really hard to describe.
All I know is Joe cursed at the machine and was like fucking work or something like that. And then you just saw more like spaghetti popsicle sticks getting made. Really weird. And then it shows Joe at home and he meets his wife, who's played by Kay Callan, and her name is Mary Lou in the film. Now, do you know who Kay Callan is?
I know she's another. I mean, we mentioned earlier, like a lot of the people in this movie seemed like vaguely familiar, and so did she. I mean, I feel like I saw her maybe like play a mom type in another movie. I couldn't place it though.
You know her. I'm gonna guarantee you one role. I will assume two though. Okay. She was Martha Kent in Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman.
Oh, okay. That was like, yeah, okay, yeah.
And she was great Nana Thromby in Knives Out. She was the old lady.
She was the old lady who was like kind of creeping in the background the whole time. Ransom, you back?
Yes. So that's her.
Wow. Small world, I guess. I mean, cool that she's continuing to get work.
Yeah. She is 84 years old. So yeah, she's still working.
That's awesome.
So you meet Kay Callan's character, and she's talking to Joe about a soap opera as if it's real life.
I didn't like. I was like taking notes at the time. I was like, I think the note that I took was like, holy shit, Joe is married? Like, who would marry this guy? And I was like writing that note down, and I missed the first part of where she's like saying that she's talking about like, like her stories or something. And I still kind of like shift focus back. And it's like, are they talking about real people? Like these people actually have friends?
They're talking about soap operas. And not only does Mary Lou have a deep knowledge of the soap operas, but it seems that Joe does too. Like Joe is equally as invested in the lives of these soap opera characters,
which is
that his wife is, which is super weird because you would think that Joe would want nothing to do with these people.
Yeah, like that definitely like sets up, or at least maybe doesn't set up, because I mean it's pretty far in the movie at this point, but like it definitely like reinforces this whole like one of these through lines for the whole movie is like these people, like they all have like really like you can tell they have really like rich like inner fantasy life. Like they all are sort of like they talk a big talk, and there's like one outward like facade, but they all like are secretly like super disappointed and dissatisfied with their lives, that they're looking and clinging to any kind of any kind of out that they might have, or any fantasy to like live a different life. And I definitely caught on to that fact that Joe, where he, after that whole rant scene, you sort of like, see behind the covers a little bit, and he's not quite as obsessed with his own rhetoric as you might think he is. And yeah, he's obsessed with a soap opera basically, and these these romantic entanglements in a soap opera, and you wouldn't think that his character would be into that stuff, but you kind of see
exactly
kind of peeking by.
And this was another scene where I was like, wow, this is going on for quite a bit of time.
That whole dinner scene, yeah.
For no real payoff. It just to show Joe and Mary Lou that they are a couple, and it seems to work between them, right? And then Joe is like, okay, I'm going to stay up and watch the news. And that's when the news broadcasts that, Frank is dead. Because for some reason, I'm assuming it's New York.
How many murders a day do they
exactly have? They talk about Frank's death, and Joe immediately goes, "Oh my God, I know the guy who did that."
Yeah, like he immediately what I really liked about that part is they don't spell it out for you. Like that's you were thinking maybe like a movie that was made 5 or 10 years ago that they would put in like some kind of flashback to what he was saying in the bar to like hit you over the head with the fact, hey, he's making those connections, but you just kind of like see it in his face.
Yeah.
That he knows, like he immediately draws a line from A to B, like, oh, that's that guy. He wasn't joking after all. He really did it. And yeah, you just like see him get, that admiration is reinforced.
And then somehow Joe finds Bill Compton at his place of work. I don't think did they say how he accomplished this feat, because it's the 70s. I'm assuming that there's multiple Bill Comptons in New York.
Yeah. I mean, it's a common enough name. I think oh no, that's what he says. He says, I looked you up. You're the only one in the phone book.
Oh, wow.
That's what he says,
okay.
Which is total nonsense. Like, come on.
That's insane. But yeah, so that he calls his place of work, and Bill finally accepts the call and meets up with Joe at where do they meet again? I forgot.
It was a bowling alley.
Bowling alley. So
Joe
it's the bowling
invites him
alley
to like his bowling alley.
Yeah.
You get there and you see Joe. He's like, he's got like a bowling shirt, like a uniform on. He's there with his like bowling team, and he's introducing his buddies.
His bowling buddies. And then Bill goes, "Oh, I don't bowl." And Joe's like, "Yeah, it's a game for morons." And he walks away from his friends.
Totally ditching them.
Exactly. But before he fully walks away, he like goes up and talks to one of them about like, making sure that they get the strike or something. So yeah. Joe is invested in the game still, but wants to make a good impression on
Bill.
He's
trying to show off a little bit. He's like, yeah, oh yeah, I don't like bowling either, but he's secretly like, oh yeah, like make sure you pull that next frame for me, will you?
Yeah. And then they sit down and they have a couple beers and they talk and commiserate about the murder of Frank. And how great it is, and how, Bill shouldn't feel bad because he made the world a better place by killing Frank.
Oh yeah, it was super like uncomfortable, and like at that point, like, and it wasn't too long between the part where he actually like kills the guy and now. I mean, it's not a ton of time in the movie, but in that time you sort of like start to feel bad for the dad a little bit, because you can see it sort of like eating away at him and the guilt, and then. Like he's clearly in such a like super vulnerable emotionally at that point in the movie. And then like Joe is just like the last person that he should have been around at that, like when he was at that point. And like the way that they lit Joe in that bowling alley scene, like I really note that down because it was made a big impression on me. They're like lighting him with this like really harsh like light from above, or I can't remember if it was like from above him or below him, but they're lighting him like, again, it's like a horror movie scene. They're lighting him like a serial killer almost.
Yeah. You can't see his eyes. Like his eyes are very deep.
Yep.
In the shadow. And he's feeding into Bill's guilt, but turning it around to be like, you should be proud of what you're doing. This isn't a guilty thing.
You did something a great thing. Yeah, you did a great thing. You did what everyone else is, dreams of doing. And that's why it was so sad to see, because like you were starting to like feel for the dad a little bit, and then you see him like go down Joe's rabbit hole, and then immediately becomes like, okay, no, you're you're a monster too, because you're feeding into this rationalization that Joe is feeding you about the guy that you murdered. He's like, yeah,
Exactly.
maybe it was not such a bad thing.
And then Joe says something similar to, I know it feels bad to kill someone, but eventually you start feeling good for doing it, because he talks about his time in the war and how, he killed a bunch of people, but he actually felt good doing it. And I guess that's kind of like Bill. That switches it around for Bill, and he's like, me and Joe are friends. And so Bill's like, why don't you come out where I go to drink? And they go into the city, and Joe is seeing, the high life, and Bill is essentially going like, all these people are idiots and they'll believe anything. And then he essentially goes like, hey, Joe's going to be your new boss. And Joe plays along with it. And I don't think Joe realizes that Bill is low-key insulting him, because he's going, these idiots will believe anything stupid.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Stupid for them to think that you could be their boss.
I didn't make that connection, but that's a really good point. Like I thought it was entertaining to watch Joe squirm in this kind of like upper class bar, but then, immediately like catch on to the whole game that they're playing with this poor guy. And like, yeah, he's going to be your new boss. And, can you believe it? He's going to really shake things up, and watching this guy immediately like change his tune and start sucking up to Joe. Yeah. Oh yeah, come by my office on Monday. We'll have a drink. But yeah, like I didn't pick up on, that's a really good point. Like,
and then Joe's like, you come by my office.
Yeah.
And then they start talking about wages. And this is another thing that I always find interesting when watching a movie from a different decade.
Old movies, right?
Joe says that he makes $4 an hour, Greg. $4 an hour.
And the union, what he said, like the union like takes some off the top of that, I think.
Exactly. So if he works for $4 an hour at 40 hours a week for 52 weeks a year, he makes $8,320.
That's insane. Like,
now, Bill says that he goes, I don't make money in hours. I make it in salary.
We make it. Well, I make money by the year, Joe. Like talking down to him, like, do you not know how salaries work?
Exactly. And Bill makes $60,000 a year in 1970 money. If that is converted to today's money,
I was hoping you'd do that.
$400,000 a year. I would probably be like Joe, where I'm like, holy God, you're rich.
Yeah.
Like $400,000 a year. That's insane. But Joe alludes to having like $10,000 in a bank and owning multiple properties down in Florida, which seems like either he's lying to show off or he is really good with his finances.
I think I kind of bought it. I mean, it didn't enter into my mind that he might be lying at that point, because I think I could sort of buy someone like him being sort of like a doomsday prepper kind of, where he would, be kind of like really squirrel away a lot of his money and be super stringent about it. I could sort of buy that from him, that he was, trying to, set himself up for the future, and which was surprising, but I found myself buying it. And then, like he says that, and the dad, Bill, he says, oh, well, I don't really have piles of money saved up myself. It was, only about 18,000, which is percentage wise way, way lower than what you would expect.
Yeah. What is he spending his money on that he doesn't have like tons of cash saved up? But I guess, if you're rich, you just spend it, right?
Yeah. Just like living whatever lifestyle that they're expected to maintain to see fit in with that social class, I guess.
And then, so as they bond over their salaries, they go to the bathroom, and Joe says, I've never pissed on ice before, which I just thought was really funny, that he associates peeing on ice as being so high class.
With high society.
Do you know why bars put ice in the urinals, Greg?
I don't. I actually found myself wondering, like, I remember seeing that happen in some places that I've been, but I never really understood it. And I think they've sort of like transitioned to these like the little chemical things that they put in there instead.
So it's twofold. One, it essentially acts like flushing. It's like a no flush situation, right? You pee on the ice melts, the water and the urine go down the tubes. And secondly, it acts as getting rid of the smell, because if you do it on a urinal cake, it just masks the scent. It doesn't get rid of it. So the ice gets rid of the scent by making it go down the tubes. So there you go.
This week on Urinal Science, kids.
Yeah, I know. We learned about speed and urinals.
Man, Google, what does the algorithm think that you're looking up for now? Because you're moving from like, what are drugs and why does urinal ice exist?
What are drugs? Why do people do drugs?
You're gonna get some weird suggestions in your Amazon cart next time.
Exactly. So after being done at the bar, Joe asks Bill, like, hey, you should come over and eat with us. And I thought Bill was going to try to ditch him, but
I thought that too, yeah.
It seems that they actually do have some kind of like connection with each other. So
Weird
Bill's like,
bond.
yeah, sure, I'll come over for dinner.
Yeah, well, I'll bring the wife. He'll make a night out of it.
And then I guess it's the same night. Bill goes home. There's Joan wearing pearls, I believe. And Bill kind of, they're talking. He's talking to Joan about, I killed Frank. And, that's Susan Sarandon's boyfriend. And Susan Sarandon, in the meantime, has broken out of the jail.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And she's like in the shadows of their apartment. And she hears it, and she goes up to her dad and was like, and this is a very key piece of dialogue. She goes, what are you going to do? Kill me too? And then she runs away into the night, and
disappears for the second half of the movie.
And Joan are just sitting there going like, okay, what are we going to do?
Got smacked.
So Bill and Joe like go out and actually try to find her at one point. They kind of like walk around the city.
Yeah, I mean, this part seemed like that. I think I mentioned earlier, like they kind of dragged in spots. I think this is where it really dragged for me, was like this whole sequence of them like moving around the city trying to find it. Like it seemed to like go on a little too long, but I mean, I think they definitely get the point across, because this is like. And this whole movie kind of reminded me of some parts of Mad Men in a couple parts, but definitely this part, because I think there are a couple scenes in that show where Don and Roger and some of those characters, like these upper class, like ad men, which I think the dad is an ad man, by the way. I think they mentioned that in the movie.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I could be making it up, but I think they mentioned it offhand, but yeah, there's like some spots in that show where they kind of like mingle with the hippie crowd, and you see this like clash of culture. And I think that definitely happens in this movie too. Like the whole scene where like they're going to that kind of hippie restaurant called the Cauldron.
Yes.
And he's like, what kind of beer do you have? We don't serve alcohol here. And Joe is just like flabbergasted. Like, what do you serve?
And then they talk about the food. And I think they say a couple Japanese dishes.
Yep.
And he gets offended. He's like, those are Japanese foods.
Oh my God. Although, I mean, not such a nice language.
Yes, he did not say, yeah.
Yeah, it was just like, it takes you back to that bar scene where it's just like, whoa, like like 0 to 11 on the like offensiveness scale. It was just like clearly that I'm sure that's what they were going for, but
and you said something key there, the culture the different
clash,
cultures of the two, because during the dinner scene with Bill and Joan and Joe and Mary Lou,
right, little dinner party,
they talk about the culture shift, and Joe gets pissed, and he's like, the kids that are ruining the culture for us.
Major trigger point for him.
And you can definitely tell there's like some resentment or resistance for wanting to move forward in life and embrace something new for Joe. He wants to live safely in that like 40s and bubble. 50s bubble, where like the man is right and everything, and the woman cooks the dinner, and they and you see it in the dinner scene too, where like the woman shuts up when the men are talking, and the women only talk about women things, don't have an opinion on like actual events,
anything substantial. Yeah, they talk, like they make that weird comment about the drapes, and I really like your name, and this is really good, like the food is really good, and how are your kids? Like, of course the women, that's what they talk about, their moms.
Exactly.
I think like I thought I heard it in this scene. I'm curious if you heard it too. Like, did they have kids that are just like, are they like empty nesters? I thought I caught a little bit of that.
I caught that too. I think Mary Lou goes, when the kids lived here,
Right.
When Joe came home, they like lined up at the door and like did a salute or something, and it was like, "Welcome home, Dad."
Yeah, like they calling Dad sir. Yeah, like they're
Yep.
lining up military style.
Like the Leave It to Beaver thing,
Mhm.
which I joke about my kid and wife doing. Like when I come home, I want everyone in a line, the dog's at the end, and everyone gets their kiss, and then
And there's a steak on the table.
Exactly. Dad reads the newspaper.
I mean,
What a horrible existence that would be.
oh yeah, I know, and like you could definitely tell that that's what, like the kind of thing Joe is expecting and is like lamenting being like kind of going the way of the dodo at this point in history. And I mean, I the reason I brought that part up about like, you know, I wish they had leaned into this a little bit more, but I definitely got the impression that Joe almost like part of his like descent into the kind of the anger and the pent up rage that he's got. Like I feel like part of that is fueled by, you know, like his kids. They say, oh yeah, they don't come around anymore. You know, like he's like resenting his own kids for abandoning him, and he's sort of like trying to like find something to blame that on. Like
Exactly.
Like, oh, I've got a dysfunctional relationship with my kids. Oh, it must be the hippie culture. It must be like all these negative influences. And,
it can't be that I'm just an asshole.
yeah, it can't be like I'm a horrible
kids don't want to be
father
around me.
Yeah,
Which like I think every parent's goal should be like, okay, like you're old, go like do something in the
Fly
world.
free.
You know, we should be an empty nester.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're at that the Japanese place, and I don't know if I'm getting these because some of the scenes at the end kind of blur together.
They do,
But
yeah. Where they go from place to place looking for the daughter.
There is a bunch of hippies at one of the tables, and the guy is essentially like, I'm going to go over there and grift them. I'm going to act like you guys are hookers, and we're going to like steal from them. And Bill immediately turns into like a stone cold guy. And he's like, I've got drugs. I've got enough drugs for myself. And then the hippies are like, he has drugs. Like, let's invite him out to a party and we can all do his drugs.
No one has grass. Wow. A guy like that, he's got to be a narc. Nah, man. Narcs don't look like that.
Oh my God. Did you write down the dialogue?
It was, I wrote down parts of it because I wanted to bring it up because like this is another one of those scenes where it totally reinforces the fact that no culture or like social status in this movie is depicted well. Like even like all of the kind of quote unquote like hippie characters, they're all like, you know, you said they're like trying to grift each other and they're all just like out to get drugs all the time, and like no one was redeemable. And I thought that was hilarious in this scene where they realized that, oh, he actually has drugs. Let's go try to get his drugs.
Exactly. And you know, that is a good point. There is no hero. There is no good person in this film. The Bill and Joan are rich, snobby buttholes. Joe
totally
is a jerk. He is so lost in time. Even at this time, he is a man out of time.
Oh, absolutely.
Mary Lou, I guess I can kind of give her a pass. She's so subservient that she kind of she's lost in the weeds.
Yeah, she's not outwardly like a negative, you know, actor in any of the you know situations, but you could tell
every hippie is is like he's depicted dirty or like, you know, of loose morals of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
And they're out to get the other person constantly.
Yeah, like no subculture, no stature, no class, like no one comes away from this movie unscathed, really.
Which transitions us into probably one of the most awkward scenes I've seen in movies in a while. It's Bill and Joe sitting on a couch and they're watching an orgy happen. And did you notice that
awkward.
Joe says orgy wrong?
He says it a couple times. It wasn't the first time in that scene. He says it like orgy, like with a hard G. And he says it a couple times earlier in the movie too. Like all these hippies, they're just coked out of their minds on doing orgies. And he's like, I've never been to an orgy before.
Which at first, it was like 11:30 at night at this point. I start Googling orgy.
Oh my God.
It's like
as if your search history wasn't tarnished enough by this point.
I'm thinking like it's a drug or it's something that they're eating. They're eating orgies together. But I'm like,
lost slang?
I'm watching and I'm like, they're just having sex. And I'm like, oh, wait, They're having an orgy, not an orgy.
Joe's just an idiot.
Yeah, which even solidifies how much of an idiot Joe is. And so Joe and Bill, they're just sitting there watching all these people have sex, and then I think it was instigated by the lead hippie, essentially to go like, "Hey, go over there and have sex with the old guys, so we can
Rob them."
Yeah, and one of the women was like, "I'm not doing that. Like, I am not having sex with Joe." Eventually, someone does, and you get Joe with his butt towards the camera, and you get to see Peter Boyle shimmy out of his pants.
It was, it was so uncomfortable. I was not expecting that.
No,
I thought they would for sure they would just like cut away, because this whole scene is like, you can tell he's kind of uncomfortable, but sort of, intrigued by it at this point.
Yep. He even comments, he's like, "Can we go into a separate room to do this?"
Yeah. Clearly like half embarrassed, kind of half ashamed, but still, kind of curious at this point, which is a total departure from, again, like all this like lousy rhetoric that he's like spouting early in the movie. And he's like, in like the first opportunity he has to sort of like dip his toe into this hippie, subculture, he's like, "Let's do it."
Yeah, let's start smoking pot and go into the orgy. And so it cuts to Joe and this woman having sex, and then the woman's like, "Wow, that was quick."
You set a speed record.
Yeah. And then he starts getting pissed. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Later, Bill seems to actually be having a really good time with this lady. And she, at least, maybe she's lying to him. She's into it too.
Mm-hmm.
So you see their stuff getting stolen. They're stealing the credit cards. They're stealing the drugs. They're, taking them for all that they're worth.
Yeah, because I mean, you see, I think like earlier in the movie, you see the dad when he's like, right after he kills Frank, he like takes all the drugs out of the apartment and like walks off with them in like a paper bag and puts them in the trunk of his car. And that's how they kind of like, get in with the hippie crowd. And this scene is like, "Oh, I've got a bunch of drugs." And yeah, like you said, like the hippies just sort of like, while they're off in their rooms with the women, the guy hippies are like kind of like rifling through the bag and like taking it all and like going through their wallets, and super scummy.
It's very. And then Peter Boyle bursts out of his room screaming, "They're like robbing us. They're robbing us." And he's walking pantsless or running pantsless down the hall.
Mel.
And then he grabs one of the girls and just starts pummeling her.
Yeah. Where did they go?
As like, "Joe, she was in the room with you.
Why would she know?
Why would she know this? Like, stop beating her." And it was like a pretty violent beating. Eventually, one of the hippie girls goes, essentially like they're on a farm.
Yeah, up on a commune upstate. Blah, 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 blah.
Bill and Joe can saddle up the ponies and get in a car, and they
road trip movie.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of showing the road trip transition, it immediately shows them there. Like, cut out part of the orgy, cut out some of the other just nonsense stuff. Show those two,
in the car, like amping themselves up, for what is about to happen.
Maybe show
maybe one B-roll shot of the car on the highway, and that was it.
Yeah, maybe show Joe having doubts and Bill building him up and be like, "Yeah, we're gonna go do this," and then, but no, they immediately get to the place, and Joe pulls out guns, which we've seen earlier in the film when he's like in his rumpus room, and he's oiling them up. And I think we forgot to comment on that. Joe's house looks kind of shitty, and then you go into the rumpus room area where his guns are, and it was pretty nice. Like, you have the wood paneling. His guns are in like in a nice cabinet. Obviously, he's like very into his guns. Very
pristine man cave, and I mean, he like the fact that he's got a gun collection and all these like bumper stickers on the walls, like it just reinforces that like every character, all the main characters anyway, they're all negative caricatures of some kind of like social or class niche. So like Joe is sort of like the stereotypical like right-wing gut nut, and the dad and the mom are sort of these like aloof, out of touch, callous upper class, and the hippies are all drug addicted and kind of also kind of aloof. Like everyone is just like a caricature, and the fact that of course Joe has a gun collection because that fits with that sort of
Exactly.
that niche of how you need to portray him.
So Bill and Joe they just knock down the door, and they're like, where's the drugs and where's the money? Like, they look, now they have like, the tables have turned, and Bill and Joe are definitely now the bad guys. Even though Bill is going like, I don't want to shoot these guys, Joe has gone completely off his rocker, and he starts shooting every hippie. And it doesn't matter if the hippies are like on the ground or
begging for their lives. It really like amps up. And yeah, he starts
murdering them all.
Yeah. Once he fires the trigger once, he just kind of like goes off his rocker.
And he's like, "Don't you love this, Bill? Like, isn't this great?"
Kind of getting
and
a high off of it.
is standing there like, this is Bill's moment of either falling along with Joe and being enabled by Joe, or finally shooting Joe, because there's that scene where Joe is on one end of the house and Bill's on the other, and Bill has his gun, and he could kill Joe immediately.
He has a big choice to make in that moment of where what am I going to subscribe to? Like which am I going to like fall down Joe's rabbit hole, or am I going to like try and redeem my humanity a little bit?
Exactly. And then there's like a loud like sound, and you see a hippie run out the door, and then you hear the gunshot, and then it freezes, and you hear the words, "What are you going to do? Kill me too?" Yep. And it's slowly revealed that the hippie that he just killed was Susan Sarandon.
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah. I mean, you could sort of, I mean, I didn't totally, I'm not going to say I called it, but you could sort of tell the way that the movie was going. And like you said earlier, when she says that phrase in the apartment, was like, "What are you going to do? Kill me too, Dad?" And it's like, okay. Yeah. So yeah, either Joe is going to do it and the dad is going to realize that, this is the guy I've been like fawning over this whole movie, or the dad was going to accidentally kill her too. And you sort of knew that was coming.
Put money on Joe killing Susan Sarandon, and then Bill going, "Oh my God, what did we do?" And then killing Joe.
And that's how it, yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely.
But instead, Bill turns into a crazy person and joins Joe again, which is insane to think that Bill is this well-to-do, rich guy, and he's essentially looking at who I would assume he views as a slob and goes, "I'm going to follow this man."
Oh yeah, totally buys into it. And I mean, completely, when he makes that decision, you can see, okay, like I'm totally like dehumanizing these people, and yeah, just starts blowing them away, just like Joe was. And I mean, the way that it ended, like you said, with the dad being the one to accidentally, and you don't see the reaction to it, you just kind of like, credits roll after that point, but having him be the one to shoot the daughter is way, way worse. And way, yes. I mean, more effective, obviously. I mean, made a much better impression, but super depressing.
It definitely made me go like, I was a little upset that it ended there. I want to see Bill's reaction. I want to see Joe's reaction to Bill killing his own daughter.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of the last half of the movie, the reason those two are together is to find this daughter. And I would love to see Joe essentially go, "Well, we did the world a favor because your daughter was a hippie." And I would just love to see the reaction to this film.
Oh yeah. So a little bit of an aftermath to see, did the dad learn anything at that point? Did he have like an immediate sense of regret? And yep. did Joe, like, did he turn around, or was he just like, haha, well done? I mean, you kind of wanted, which you could sort of like, I think he was kind of beyond redemption at that point, but
exactly,
like, a little part of you still was sort of rooting for the dad to sort of figure it out at that point, but of course he didn't.
Yep. All the characters just make the worst mistakes and choices throughout the entire film. And you as the viewer are just sitting there going, wow, idiots.
These are all terrible people. And like the part where, and the reason I remember the phrase so well is when they Joe is, they're back at the hippie, bachelor pad, and he's trying to get information out of the women, like where do they go, and the woman says, oh, they're at a commune upstate, and you hear the word commune, and you think, oh, it's like some kind of like nice farm, and everyone's like, you think of like the Sunshine and Rainbows version of what a hippie commune is, and you get there and it's just like, it's like a crack house. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like it's in the winter. It's all kind of like gray, and the house is dirty, and they're all like huddled in corners on mattresses. And
Yeah, there's no like real furniture.
No.
It's just crap
yeah,
inside of it.
it like everyone made such horrible decisions, and so few characters are redeemable in any way. I mean, the pity is like probably closer to what you feel about a lot of these characters by the end.
So after the movie, when the movie comes out, Greg, in the real world, it gets really good reviews. People generally like it. It made $19.3 million off of a budget of $106,000.
Wow.
Now, one of the interesting things, as we've said throughout this entire review, is that no one is a good person in it,
No.
especially Joe.
Especially Joe, yeah.
But the audience reaction was that Joe was a great guy. And people
Really?
actually cheered on Joe throughout the entire film.
Like in a test screening or something?
Yeah, so much so, it says that when Peter Boyle saw the audience members cheering for the violence in Joe, he refused to appear in any other film or TV show that glorified violence. And he actually gave up the role of Jimmy Doyle, the main character in The French Connection, because he was essentially like us. Like, why
Return
are
to Gene
you
Hackman, yeah.
why are you rooting for this horrible person?
That's really interesting. I would not have expected. I thought for sure this would have played into sort of like, people would have been on the side. I mean, I guess it's hard to be on anyone's side in this movie, but I would think that like the people would see Joe as like the negative influence
Exactly.
that kind of like brought the dad down. But that's really shocking that people were like cheering for him. And I mean, I guess
Joe
was going on at the time, but
Joe is the devil on the shoulder.
yeah, exactly.
Obviously, since it was a hit, made a lot of money. I know $20 million doesn't sound like a lot, but a budget of $106,000, that's a huge return on investment.
Yeah,
it's the
return.
70s. Canon actually did announce that there was going to be a sequel, Joe 2, called Citizen Joe. And the tagline was, "The man has changed, but the times have not. He's back."
Interesting. Was that shortly after release that they announced that, or was that kind of when is that?
1985 is when they
so
announced that it was going to come out.
quite some time
15
later.
years later. And it was going to be about Joe as he tries to rebuild his life after spending 10 years in prison, and would also deal with his grown-up kids who held more liberal beliefs.
Oh, interesting. I mean, that could have been actually pretty interesting. I would have wanted to see that, because I mean, you sort of like we were talking about earlier, you sort of like they allude to his, kind of dysfunctional relationship with his family. That it might have been interesting to see that kind of revisited later. But
Definitely. I think the only thing that's not believable is that he would get 10 years
only
for
10
killing,
years, right?
for killing like 10 hippies. So that's only a year per hippie. So
that math doesn't add up there, movie.
yeah, exactly. Art imitating life, life imitating art. Around the time of Joe's release, there was a mass murder with similar themes,
Like motivations, I guess.
motivations to the movie's climax in Detroit, Michigan. So much so I'm gonna cut that part out. So much
Leave
so
it in.
that when they were choosing the jurors for the trial,
Mhm.
if you've seen Joe, they wouldn't let you be a part of it.
Oh wow! Like the judge or the counsel, like actually, like they thought that this movie would be an influence on the jury.
Yeah. So they were like, "Have you seen Joe? Have you ever talked about Joe? And if you have, you got to go."
That's interesting.
That's the tagline for the trial.
I mean,
Have you seen Joe?
Have you seen? Yeah, like okay, you're out. I mean, it totally makes sense having seen the movie. I mean, it sounds like, but was it like a week or two after? How close to the film was it?
It says which is odd. It says like 10 weeks before Joe was released, but I guess, you know, it
And
says
the
during
trial was-
pretrial
yeah.
deliberations, Judge Joseph A. Gillis saw Joe and strongly advised both the prosecution and defense teams to do the same. He then carefully screened each member of the jury pool and excluded anyone who had seen the movie. So I guess the murder happened 10 years before, or 10 weeks
yeah.
before the murder, and then when it got to trial, it was out,
Right.
and so
That's it.
very interesting.
That's very interesting. I mean, actually, that brings up a good point. Wasn't there a similar? I mean, this might have been later in the '80s. A similar murder in New York, like a guy on a subway had similar kind of like, he was kind of like a joke kind of character, and then ended up like killing a bunch of people on a subway, or that they were like trying to mug him or something.
I think so. It sounds. I mean, New York in the '80s. That's probably. I don't want to sound too callous, but that sounds like it happened a lot.
Right. I mean, that's interesting. I wouldn't have expected to have people cheering Joe on as like this like vigilante hero, and having, so much so that they thought it would impact, a partiality. I don't know if that's a word, but the ability for a juror to be impartial on a trial. That's really interesting.
And it's interesting to see in New York in the 70s, and even in the 80s when you see it in the films, as run down and dirty, and like it just doesn't seem like a safe place. Because when I went there last year, I never felt unsafe the entire time that I was in New York.
No, not at all.
So it's weird to see like this old version of New York. And from my understanding from reading things about New York, it very much was like at one point unsafe. Like there was murders, and it was kind of like Chicago or Detroit at one point,
Sure,
where it was just kind of a rundown hellhole.
Oh, yeah, I remember hearing similar things about, I mean, this again before our time, but hearing and reading things about even Times Square, the sort of like Disney tourist destination that it is today, being like lots of like drug use and prostitution and porn theaters, and like it's kind of like a seedy area that you don't really want to go to.
Yeah,
crazy how much it's changed.
And now I take my kid there, and we go to like the M&M factory. We buy M&Ms.
How times have changed.
So what would you give Joe out of 5 stars? What would you give it?
Out of 5 stars? I mean, I'm probably like a 3.5 or a 4 even. I mean, I was very pleasantly surprised there. And I mean, aside from like the set dressing, making it seem kind of old, like the old pull tab beer cans and the cars, and like it felt very modern in a lot of the themes, and almost like like it was predicting almost, and things that we deal with today in terms of like political and generational and class divide. It seemed all very, very applicable. And I was actually quite enjoyed watching it. So yeah, I'd say probably leaning on 3.5 or a 4 star.
I gave it a 3. Only because there were some scenes that dragged on for quite some time. The orgy part, the dinner scenes.
Yeah, definitely some parts in the middle.
This is everything to do with me. I understand you need this kind of stuff, but as I get older and as movies change, I find it very hard to watch films where like it's overly racist. Like a Tarantino film is a little bit different because that's played up for the ham factor.
Oh, absolutely.
But movies written where you're like, there's a guy in the 70s who's exactly like this. It really just it upsets me.
And it was played super straight. Yeah.
And that's the point. And I get it, but I don't have to like it. And the fact that I don't like it, I think shows like where we're moving to. Hopefully people realize stuff like that is wrong. But I think the themes that you said of class division and like you're this and I'm that will always echo really well throughout time. You'll never lose that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great way to put it. I mean, I feel like that's probably part of why I enjoyed this as much as I did. Is it didn't feel. I mean, I some people are different. Like, oh, I can't watch old movies; they're so boring. I mean, and to a certain degree, I'm maybe like that. And some movies from around that area, I find kind of boring and hard to watch. But I mean, this I was totally engaged the whole time, and I think that was probably part of it is because just like I said, aside from the sort of the set dressing, a lot of it felt very relevant and familiar enough that it didn't feel like an old movie so much to me.
Exactly. No, I totally 100% agree with you there. So that's Joe. And preparing for the film, going through the cast list and the director and the writer, I obviously am interested to see what some of these actors are doing now. A lot of them, Peter Boyle has passed away, and he had a great career. He was in Everybody Loves Raymond. He was in Young Frankenstein. Huge career.
In that X-Files episode?
That X-Files episode. But one that I saw was Kay Callan. And I associate more with her as Martha Kent from The New Adventures of Superman.
Right.
And I just so happened to Google her name. And she has a website. And
really?
On her website, it's like I don't want to speak too badly of it. It's like a GeoCities Wix type deal here.
Lots of marquee text and flashing GIF ads.
But it also has her email address. And I sat there at my computer looking at the email address and went, you know what? I'm going to ask 2 questions. And I kind of just wrote them down really quick and I sent them off.
No.
The next day, I got a response back. I freaked out, and then I immediately went,
That's awesome.
I should have put more thought into these questions. I never really expected to get an answer. So this is what I wrote. Dear Miss Callan, I have a podcast where we review canon films, and Joe is our next episode. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind answering a few questions for me regarding your role.
Awesome.
I asked her, what was it like working with John Avildsen, which is the director? You worked on low-budget films like Joe and high-budget films like Knives Out. Which do you prefer? Because sometimes, actors, actresses, they go like, oh, I like the smaller films. Or some of them, probably like Robert Downey Jr., go, I like the big films because I make billions
a bunch
of
of money and like the spectacle, yeah. Sure, it's a different experience from an actor's perspective.
And then I asked, did you enjoy working with Peter Boyle? This was before I realized how little they actually interacted in the film with each other.
One scene, 2 scenes, maybe.
Exactly. And then I said, thank you for your time. I grew up watching you as Martha Kent on Lois and Clark, and I loved it. Your fan, Philip Cowgill. And then Kay Callan writes back, hi, Philip.
That's amazing.
Who wouldn't rather work on a high-budget movie than for 35 cents. But then that 35-cent movie was my first movie and therefore I was going to say exciting, but who knew when we made it that it was going to end up being the hit that it was? No one involved had that much of a resume. It was Peter and Susan and I's first movie, and I pretty much forgot about it as soon as we shot it.
Oh, wow.
John was a really terrific director, one of the few directors who really knew what to say to an actor to simulate you to go someplace you might not have thought of. And it was lots of fun being Superman's mom. I'm glad you enjoyed watching Dean and Terry. Weren't they the best? Good luck on your podcast, Kay.
That is awesome. What a great reply.
I know. I was flipping out. I think Jackie thought I was having a heart attack or something like that.
You were on speed.
Yeah, I was on speed. Because I was just jumping up and down. Obviously we can't guarantee that that's going to happen every time that we have a podcast.
I was saying it can only go downhill from here. Well, That's a podcast, folks. See you next time.
But I will continue to research and try to reach out to actors and actresses and people on the films. And I'm only going to ask 1 or 2 questions because I don't want to take up too much of the time and I don't want it to be annoying. So hopefully in the future we can get someone else to write in. We'll see, but I can guarantee you it won't happen for our next one, Greg, because almost everyone that I Googled is either dead or disappeared.
Oh no.
And the movie,
we're going out of the gutter, kids.
Exactly, is called The Beast in the Cellar. And this one also came out in 1970, and it's a horror film. So I think we're going to have some fun here.
In our wheelhouse.
It is on Amazon Prime. So even better, we don't really have to pay to watch it.
Perfect.
And the tagline for it is, a soldier is murdered when his vehicle breaks down during maneuvers in the English countryside. When the police inspect the body, they are puzzled by the ferocity of the attack. But what kind of vicious beast could have inflicted such horrific wounds on its victim?
Dun, dun,
Bum bum
dun.
bum. The Beast in the Cellar. Starring a whole bunch of people we
You've
don't
never heard
know.
of.
And you can tell that you've never heard of them because most of them don't have a link in Wikipedia. And if they do, it goes to some like larger article about just British actors.
Yeah, that's usually like a litmus test for how unknown they are. Is some like there's that gray area sometimes where they've got IMDb and like IMDb profile, but not a Wikipedia, and then there's the truly unknown ones who are not even findable on IMDb.
Exactly. I don't think I'm going to have too much of backstory for this film either. The director, again, I can't really find too much about him, but it's going to be awesome. Our first canon horror film.
First canon horror film. Yeah, I forgot. Actually, I forgot to ask you. Was this? I think I know, but this was like firmly before sort of the '80s, mass-produced action schlock that we saw later, right? Like this was still like the previous owners, or was it still under the like the founding owners' leadership?
I think it was kind of like, so Joe was a Canon Group British Lion Films, venture between the two. And yeah, because Joe actually, the writer, Norman Wexler, was nominated for an Oscar for Joe.
Really?
Best original screenplay. So that's
great.
Well before it starts turning into schlock and, the same, copy, paste, change the name around type deal here.
Right. To make a buck. That's really cool. I didn't know that it was actually got an Oscar nod for some of this. I mean, I think it earned it. I mean, it was, all the lines in the acting was all very believable. So
exactly.
Good for him.
And we're going to do a couple more in this decade. Like I said, we're not going to do all of them. We're definitely going to do The Beast in the Cellar because it's a horror film and we both like horror.
Of course.
And I'm going to say that we're going to do Gas Pump Girls, which is probably going to be the last film of this decade that we're going to do.
Okay.
But the reason why I want to do Gas Pump Girls is because one of the actresses, Sandy Johnson, is Judith Myers in Halloween. And this is also the last film she ever did.
Oh, so she did Halloween and then Gas Pump Girls, and it's like, okay, I'm out.
She did Halloween, a movie called HOTS. It's like an acronym. It stands for Hands Off of Those Suckers. Or
what?
Yeah, it says in the Wikipedia article, the film is believed to stand for Hands Off Those Suckers, or it could also mean Hold On to Sex.
Okay.
Either or. But I want to see Gas Pump Girls because also Joe Bob Briggs talked about it. And then there's another one called Mako, The Jaws of Death in 1976, which looks like a Jaws ripoff.
Mako Shark.
So
Yep.
We'll find a couple more to do in here. But yes, the next one will be The Beast in the Cellar. So unless you have anything else, Greg, I think we can wrap it up there. Any final thoughts?
No, I mean, I think that's kind of got it across. I mean, I was pleasantly surprised at how how engaging it was, and actually quite enjoyed it. So that's why I asked, if this was before sort of like the negative stigma with canon films came about, because I thought, this was pretty well made. I mean, kind of like an indie drama and pretty effective, and not at all what I was kind of going into it semi-expecting from it. Like I thought for sure the violence would be like amped up a lot more than it really was, and it was not an action movie at all. And so I mean, all of the violence felt very grounded and effective and kind of sad, and it definitely came across really well. So don't worry, I quite enjoyed it.
We're running towards the cliff right now. I think once we hit Gas Pump Girls, we're in a free fall. And there is no parachute.
Free fall into the sewers of canon films in the 80s.
Exactly. And it's going to be great. So if you're interested in following us on Twitter, it's @That'sCanon. We are also That's Canon on Instagram. And if you're interested in writing to us and having your question read on the show and answered, you can email us at That's Canon. That's 2 N's in Canon, ThatsCannon @gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today. And remember, since we said it,
that is canon.
Well, I've never seen anything like this before. Never.
Neither have I, Superintendent.
Human, animal, or animal?
Joyce! Joyce! He's gone! He's gone!
What is the sinister secret of the beast in the cellar?